Ecclesiastes chapter 4, we're getting there, folks. We're almost halfway. And I trust that this series in Ecclesiastes is an encouragement to you all. It's been a great challenge and encouragement to myself, I know, as I've been studying through it. It's a great book that helps put our lives on this earth in perspective. And it's exactly what we're going to continue to do in Ecclesiastes 4. We're going to look at most of the chapter today, verses 4 through 16. Talking about the importance of laboring with wisdom. Laboring with wisdom. As a young 20-something, which I am right now, 26 to be exact, it's been interesting for me to connect with old friends from high school, from college. You kind of lose contact after you move on. Everybody goes their separate ways. But from time to time, Megan and I will run into our old friends. And it's interesting, we always talk immediately about how everybody's doing, and then we talk about what they are up to. And without fail, regardless of who I talk to, myself included in this, what usually happens is what? We talk about our level of success as it would be considered in this world. And so regardless of the person's interest, regardless of the person's job or plans for a job in the future, they usually talk about what their goal is for success or what they are doing that would be deemed as successful in this life right now. So normally phrases like whatever the job that they're doing, the pay is good, come out. Good career options are there. Good job security is there. The perks are nice. I don't have to work as many hours as I normally do at this job. The benefits are terrific at this job. I'm doing what I trained to do. I'm doing what I spent, 10, 20, 15 years in school doing, studying for. And we deem that when we hear things such as that from people we've known in the past as either successful or maybe not successful, depending upon what you hear. And I do this myself. We talk to somebody and you want to talk about your resume, so to speak, and talk about how successful you are. Why do we do that? And we do this, adults do this all the time, right, regardless. Where are you at in life? Well, here's what I'm doing. Hopefully pushing on the person that's listening the imprint of, I am successful in life. So what is a successful life look like? Living in America, we're trained to believe that when these things describe your situation in life, then you can deem yourself as a successful member of society. And while there is a lot of good in what we try to do, for instance, we're talking about where they've arrived probably as a result of discipline, hard work, integrity. Those are good things that we certainly don't want to brush under the rug or ignore or say that they aren't good things. They are good things, but what's the point here? We're talking about what defines you as a person, your level of success in this life. And according to this world and the country we live in right now, your success is often tied to whatever you do in your career, your work, your job, what you labor at in life. And so we talk to somebody, we hear what they do, and we gauge their success in life based on that. For those of us that are currently working in jobs right now, what do we often do? Oftentimes, a very good conscience, we work ourselves to death, right? Doing whatever it takes in the name of hard work and discipline to be a quote-unquote success in this world. But is this really success? Or could it perhaps be one of the biggest lies that Christians have unwittingly bought into in the day and age that we live in right now? As Christian Americans, we work hard. The question is, why? What is driving us to work so hard and so long for so many hours? And our temptation may be to say, if I were to ask you, you'd say, well, I work hard to bring glory to God. And I don't want to diminish that, and I don't want to come out and say that is not what your goal is. But I want to be pointed, and when I say, I want you to think and think critically about yourself, that perhaps, while that may be part of your goal, perhaps that is not the entirety of your goal. If the truth be known, many of us are working hard to climb the corporate ladder, to impress our boss, to meet our own expectations, and to make more money. However, working long and hard for these reasons will only lead, oftentimes, to bitter disappointment. And some of you maybe have experienced that in life, where you've worked your whole life. You've succeeded in what you've done, and you found, though, at the end, there's not much to it. You're left wanting. You're left lacking in what you thought your career, your job would be. Solomon, recognizing the danger here, provides the solution, I think, to this problem that we in America face today, but interestingly, they faced back in Solomon's day as well. This is an epidemic that is common with the human race. Trying to find our definition instead of in Christ in what we do, in our careers, in our jobs, in the labor that we work so hard at in this life. What really defines us? Is it those things, or as believers, is it Christ? Ought it be Christ? Well, the answer is obvious, but let's think critically about our lives right now. We know the answer, yet do we live it out day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out? For sake of time, we won't read through the whole passage here. We're going to start, though, in verse 4 of chapter 4 in Ecclesiastes. And as we read through this, we're going to see, I think, 3 specific encouragements or keys that Solomon teaches us on the importance of working or laboring with wisdom. How do we as believers labor with wisdom? Let's begin in verse 4 of chapter 4. Solomon says, "Again, I considered all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. The fool foldeth his hands together and eateth his own flesh. Better is an handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit." When I was a kid, I was extremely competitive. Everything in life was a competition to me. I struggle with this today still. Some of you that played sports know that. If you played it with me. I hate losing. I want to be first at everything I do. I'm competitive in stuff that I do. And as a kid, I mean, it was even more than now. Literally everything. And I got thinking back as I was preparing for this about my childhood, and I remembered some of the craziest things that I would compete over. Stupid things like, when I know I'm going up the stairs at the same time as one of my sisters, immediately my thought is I will be the first at the top of the stairs. I will be the first. I will beat my sister at the top of the stairs. I realized that I would, when I was eating, we'd be eating supper. We always ate supper as a family together every day. And I would watch people eat around, my sisters, my family, whoever I was eating with. I would watch them as I ate just to make sure that nobody beat me to the finish, okay? I was going to finish eating before everybody else did. That's how I lived. And guys understand this. Any boys out there, you know how it is. You're running to play a new game with a friend or something, and you start out walking. You're both kind of neck and neck, and then it's like an unspoken rule that it's a competition. Who's going to get to this new thing first, right? That's what we do. And so it just happens. We compete for things, right? That's exactly how it was. I don't think I'm alone in that. Something I realized, even as a kid, was that because I was so competitive, I would often struggle with pride, and as a result of that, I would struggle with the sin of envy. Because the reality is nobody can be best or good at everything, right? And so for those things that you can't be, what do? You oftentimes look to somebody else, and in pride, you are envious of what you see somebody else able to do or doing right now, or a position that they have in life that you wish you could have. And so because of that state of competition and this whole identity that this world wants to push you into of your identity is in your job, what do? We result in a state of envy, oftentimes in the workplace. In verses 4 through 6, Solomon discusses the result of somebody that is driven by competition. He discusses the workaholic. But on the other side of the coin, the other extreme, he also discusses the lazy sluggard, and then he strikes the biblical balance between the two extremes. In verse 4, he writes again, I consider all travail and every right work, that for this a man is envied of his neighbor. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. Solomon once again observes life. He is a student of the humans in general, okay? He watches people. I love watching people. You can go to the mall, you go anywhere. You love watching people, right? This is how Solomon lived. He didn't just watch people, though. He examined how they lived their life day in and day out. He examined what drove people, what didn't drive people. He examined why relationships built in certain ways and where they didn't in other ways. He understood how people operated in life. And the same is here. He's watching people. He was a people watcher. And what did he see? In this verse, Solomon discovers that people compete with one another in everything. And the use of the word every here in this verse means every type of labor and achievement. The point is, much achievement is the result of a desire to be superior over others. Much achievement is a result of a desire to be superior over others. We live in a constant state of competition. Research indicates that 9 out of 10 office workers suffer from professional envy of colleagues that perceive to have more glamorous or better paying jobs than they have. 9 out of 10. What drives many people to climb the corporate ladder and outdo others? On the other side of the coin, you have the person that perhaps understanding all of these things and understanding the dangers of envy and rivalry decides that they are going to eliminate competition whatsoever. They are going to stop trying to drive, stop trying to push, and they're just going to lay back. They don't want to crawl over people to get to the top. So what they do is they just kind of back off. And the danger that we see there, if you keep going that direction, is it ultimately lands you in where? A state of laziness. And that's not what we're pushing today. And I don't want my message today, or in Ecclesiastes here, the message to be skewed to where you think that I am talking or preaching against hard work. That is not the case whatsoever. But there is an appropriate balance between laziness and drive in the workplace and the things that we labor in that must be had. And this is the balance that Solomon is talking about. The language in this verse here means lazy people eventually, and it's kind of funny, it talks about basically lazy people eating themselves, all right? This is not like literal here. This is hyperbole. He's making exaggerated point here about what he's trying to say. He's saying that ultimately a lazy person will not fend for himself, will not work hard enough to provide his own meal, and he'll wind up eating himself, okay? So he's talking about the extreme of if you don't drive and if you don't push yourself, if you don't work hard, you're going to wind up lazy. And in laziness, what does that result in? Well, that results in not having what you need to survive in life. Obviously, that is not the answer, and that's the point that Ecclesiastes, here in Ecclesiastes, Solomon is making. Laziness is not the answer to the sin of envy. So there has to be a balance. As Christians, we're taught in Scripture not to run from work, but to engage in it with the right goal in mind. In Colossians 3:23, it says, "And whatsoever ye do, do it what? Do it heartily, from the soul, with passion, with desire. Do it heartily as to who?" Here's the key. As to the Lord, and not unto who? And not unto men. And there's the key that I think, this is kind of what Solomon in a nutshell is trying to get across here. We're not talking about not working. And some of the teens are like, this is great, keep talking, I don't have to do school anymore. This is not what we're talking about. This is not what Solomon is trying to get across. Work is good. Hard work. Being passionate about your job, about what you do, is a good thing. Continue to do that. But the danger comes in what? And what he is describing here as what you define your life, who you are as a person in. If your definition of yourself is attached to what you do, your job, there's a problem. A dangerous problem. In verse 6, Solomon says, "Better is an handful with quietness than both the hands full with travail and vexation of spirit." And while at first this kind of may seem like a contradiction to verse 5, we must remember that this is a proverb. It must be read within the context. This is not a free pass for laziness, but rather an admonition here to find the proper balance between being driven in your job and what you labor in life, and the opposite of being lazy. Solomon is saying, rather than grasping for so much that you have to be a workaholic to get it, be content with less. The truth is, we want far too much oftentimes, don't we? The cure is contentment, being willing to settle for less materially if it means that if we can come to some kind of rest in life. The world wants us to think that success means you go and you go and you go. And there's some type of a heroic feeling, a heroic sense when you say, I work myself to death. Someone looks at you and says, that's the man right there. That's the woman right there. She is working hard. He is working hard, killing themselves. That's success right there. It's not the case. To the businessman who feels that the monotony of the job will never end, to the stay-at-home mom who somehow feels that what you are doing isn't important in life, to the student who feels like school will never end, to the one who feels All you have to your success log, so to speak, of life is your job. Find the balance in life. The key is contentment, being content where you are and where God has put you in the workplace that you are in right now. Be a hard worker, but be so careful not to buy into the cultural definition of success in this world. As you seek to work in wisdom, prioritize contentment over achievement. Prioritize contentment over achievement. Number 2, not only must we prioritize contentment over achievement, but we must also value people over money. We must value people over money. Look down at verse 7 with me. Reading to verse 12, he says, "Then I returned, and I saw vanity under the sun. There is one alone, and there is not a second. Yea, he hath neither child nor brother, yet is there no end of all his labor. Neither is his eye satisfied with riches, neither saith he, For whom do I labor and bereave my soul of good? This also is vanity. Yea, it is sore travail. Two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him that is alone, when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. Again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? And if one prevail against him, two shall withstand him. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken." As I was studying for this, I ran across a quote from a pastor, a preacher, who I'm not going to attempt to say his name because it was pretty hard to say. But he wrote a sermon, in his sermon called Life Without God, he said this: "Competition crushes your ability to celebrate someone else's success. It crushes your ability to weep with those who weep, because it has the tendency to establish pride when you are doing better than others, and despair sets in when you are falling behind others. And so you neither have the freedom to celebrate someone else's success, because your worth and your value is being ahead of them, not behind them. And it also fails to empower to weep with those who weep, without thinking you are better than the person who is suffering. And so competition just kills whatever possibility of community and friendship we might have. When you conclude that worth requires winning, life becomes very lonely." I thought that was great, and exactly the point that I think in Ecclesiastes Solomon is trying to get across here. The result that follows a person whose value is wrapped in achieving the highest goals possible is ultimately an inability to truly obey the second greatest commandment in Scripture, to love thy neighbor as thyself. You can kind of see how these are feeding together. The first point of when you put your self-worth in your job, you're constantly doing what? You're constantly trying to get the top, and all you see around you are people that are competing for your job. Or all you're seeing are people that are distractions to your success, to your ability to get things done. And so what do? What often happens, we kind of put people on the side. People can wait, right? Right now, my job is this, and I will accomplish my job at whatever cost necessary. It's impossible to have and build relationships when your goal, when your identity is in your job and not Christ. It's impossible to have a focus on others when you're consumed in your job. Do you know anybody like this? I'm sure we all, maybe you're even right now thinking of maybe somebody in your workplace, somebody at school that is so driven that regardless of who is around them, what the needs are around them, they don't care. They are driven, they are focused, they're going to get the job done. I want to give here kind of a little scenario, a little example of what I think it is talking about here in this passage, but I want to put it in the modern culture, the modern context here. So here's what we're talking about. This type of person, man or lady, that's probably studied for between 4 and 10 years at school, college, went to school for the career that they were interested in. They graduated, they worked hard at what they did. They found a job at a good business that had the right career options that they were looking for, and they begin to work hard at it. They find a spouse eventually, they get married, they have kids, and they continue to work hard, extremely hard. And we'll put it in the context of a dad here for a second. The dad, he gets up real early, 5, 6, goes to work, doesn't get home till late, 7, 8 o'clock at night because he's working so hard, getting that overtime, trying to be a success. And in his mind, he thinks, this is my job. This is my responsibility to my family. I have to provide. I have to provide. I have to do my job as a dad, as a father. He likes his job, though. He enjoys what he does. He enjoys being successful at something. And so he drives himself at it. He pushes himself. He comes home late. He loves his family. He really does. He loves his wife. But because of all the stress of the day, oftentimes it takes him an hour or two to kind of let off, just kind of gather thoughts, get some rest. So he plops down on the couch, he watches TV or whatever for a while. By that point, it's late. Kids have already gone to bed. He's tired, says a few words to his wife, goes to bed, gets up, does it all over again the next morning. Not consciously saying, I don't care about my family, I don't care about people around me. I'm doing my job, though. And he recognizes, he says, I know I need to spend more time with my family. I've got to put a priority on the people around me, people at work. I failed to talk to this person over here because I had something else going on that I needed to get done. He recognizes the issue oftentimes, yet in his mind he says, as time goes on, as I advance in my career, it will get better. I will have more time. I will be able to spend more time with my kids. I'll make this up later on. He continues to work hard. He continues to succeed. He continues to rise in the company, in the business. Finally, he reaches the ultimate goal that he set out way back when he was a freshman in college. The end is there. The success is there. Everyone around him in his workplace says, you did it. And when he talks to people about his success, they say, you did it. You made it to the end. You accomplished success in this world and your career. But he looks back and he realizes that his family, his kids are grown up all of a sudden. When did that happen? They're gone to college, and he recognizes, he remembers all of the things that he missed, the opportunities that he missed. And he recognizes that in his desire to succeed as the world would deem success, he failed to invest himself in the people that were around him, oftentimes the one that he loved the most. This is kind of the general applicable person here that Solomon, I believe, is talking about. Back when I lived in Chicago, as a kid, one of our traditions every year was to go downtown, and we would watch, every Christmas season, we would watch the Christmas Carol play. It was done very well, and I enjoyed it. It's because of that memory, it's become one of my favorite Christmas stories. And it's all familiar, right? The character of Scrooge, who is kind of the epitome of what we're talking about here, the hyperbole of what is being described here. The man that put his career before literally everything else in his life. And we all know the story well. I think probably the climax, the part of the story that always got me was when he was with the Ghost of Christmas Future, I guess. And it's towards the end, it's kind of the climax, and they are attending what is preparations for a funeral or discussion of people within the business world of Scrooge that were talking about somebody who just passed away. And they were talking basically about as insensitively as you possibly could about somebody who has just died. Y'all remember the story, right? And he's wondering, Scrooge is wondering, who are they talking about? But in deep down, he really knows who they're talking about. They're talking about him. And the reality is that at his own funeral, there was nobody there. Nobody cared. The only ones that, maybe the ones that showed up wanted what? Food, right? That was it. They didn't care about him at all. But I remember even as a kid, and to this day, I think about that, I think, how sad is that? The man had as much money as you could possibly want. He was successful in what he did. Yet, and when it came down to the end of his life, no one was there. No one cared. And obviously that is an extreme example of what is being talked about right here. Part of the whole end of the story is his realization of this and his ability to turn it all around. And to realize that life is not about the money, not about the career, not about the success. It is about relationships with people. In our quest to reach the top in the name of responsibility and good financial management, we oftentimes fail to impact the people around us for Christ. Solomon goes on here in verses 9 through 12 to explain the benefits of relationships. And we see here kind of three, I think, specific benefits that result from a life that is invested in people. What can you expect when you decide to invest your life in the people around you? What is that supposed to look like? Number one, friends increase reward and labor. Friends increase reward and labor. Verse 9 of Ecclesiastes 4 says, two are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. Verse 11, again, if two lie together, then they have heat. But how can one be warm alone? This whole idea of two is better than one. I think I saw the greatest example of this in my life in our mission trip, actually, last year with our teens. We had a group of teens that we had a huge task to put out several thousand tracts to invite people to come to a family fun fest that we were hosting at a church there in San Diego. And I got thinking about it as I was preparing. Imagine if myself, I planned it, I got the mission trip together, but what if I just said, I'm going to do this one on my own, I think. And I get out there and I try to, at the best of my ability, as hard as I could possibly work, to get the thousands of tracts out, to set the whole family fun fest up, to run every booth by myself. The reality is what? Is it possible? No, it's not at all. And part of what I realized was the glory, the benefit, the joy of working with people. And how much more can be accomplished for Christ when people are involved, more people are involved besides just me. When two are together, there is value. And it says here there's great reward. I want to think that even beyond that, there's reward here of relationship. The benefit of being able to share your burdens with somebody else, to labor together in something, to build a relationship with somebody else that otherwise you never would be able to. Number one, friends increase reward. Number two, friends encourage one another in times of trouble. Verse 10 says, for if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow, but woe to him that is alone when he falleth, for he hath not another to help him up. I think this one in particular is hard for men. We like to do things on our own, don't we? This is one I oftentimes believe I struggle with. We want to do things without help, don't we? To ask for help requires what? It requires a level of humility. It requires you saying, I can't do something on my own. I shouldn't try to do this thing on my own. Therefore, I'm going to find somebody else. I'm going to find somebody else to bear this burden with me. Now, we must understand the value of relationships, of sharing our thoughts and our feelings, valuing the importance of accountability with another, being willing and humble enough to seek help, and then loving enough to offer help when we see the need is there. Let me ask you a pointed question. When was the last time you abandoned or put off a task that needed to be done for the sake of another? As soon as I say that, again, I think of my dad. I remember him as a senior pastor in Chicago. He had so many responsibilities, so many things going on, but I remember him, and I didn't understand it at the time as a kid. I would all the time need help with my schoolwork. And as busy as it was, the things that he was doing, people's lives weren't at stake of what he was doing. I mean, he was dealing with a lot of important issues, a lot of different people. Yet when it came down to my need for a little bit of help in something, he immediately, without fail, would put things aside, important things that I didn't realize at the time, and say, okay, let me help you. Let me give you a few minutes of my time to help you with something. You know what? That meant the world to me. Even more now as I look back upon that. But when is the last time you were willing to put aside a job? And we get in our groove, don't we? We get in the day, we have our schedule, we have our plan of what we want to accomplish in a day. We get into work, and what happens oftentimes? It gets frustrated pretty quickly, doesn't it? We can't accomplish everything, and if our identity, if everything in life is wrapped up in what we want to accomplish in our job, what oftentimes happens is we fail to live this out. We fail to build relationships around us. When was the last time you abandoned something you knew you needed to get done for the sake of somebody else? I thought coming into ministry full-time, that would be the easiest thing in the world. Man, it's not. Pastor likes to call it the minutia of ministry, the things that just go on, that help structure, that keeps the church functioning. Someone's got to plan things, right? Someone's got to organize things. oftentimes what happens is what? I fail to reach out to somebody that is struggling. I fail to invest properly in a counseling opportunity because I got to organize my calendar. If we're not actively thinking this way about the importance of relationships in this life, that is what matters, then we'll fail to invest in them. Our default is to go and drive ourselves to get what we want done. It's a sin of selfishness, really. Advancing ourselves instead of the people around us. So friends increase reward in labor. Friends encourage one another in times of trouble. Number 3, friends fight for one another. In verse 12, it says this, "And if one prevail against him, 2 shall withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken." I always enjoy watching a good war movie, and I've watched enough to know that the moral is usually about the same. In times of extreme adversity in battle, the success or destruction of a group of soldiers will usually be determined by how well they understand this principle right here. A man that stands alone is weak and inept to handle the weight of battle on his own. But when men gather together and fight as a supporting unit, what happens? The odds of their success increase by a lot. So many of us right now are faltering behind our lonely walls built up by pride, not willing to admit when help is needed. Or perhaps you're on the other end, too blinded by ambition to pause and stand with someone who is in need of your help, of your assistance. Are you currently bearing someone else's burdens? Do you know of other people around you, what they're struggling with right now, the burdens that they are facing right now? I could stop right there, and perhaps many of us feel guilty. I know myself I do. Because we get so wrapped up in what we have going on in life that if we're honest, we fail to even know what's going on in the people that we claim to love the most. Are you bearing somebody else's burden right now? If we are carrying out that second greatest commandment of loving others as we love ourselves, then ought that not be the case? Bearing one another's burdens. Working in wisdom values people and relationships over money. Finally, we see here the third key to working in wisdom in verses 13 through 16. Beginning in verse 13, it says, "Better is a poor and a wise child than an old and foolish king, who will no more be admonished. For out of prison he cometh to reign, whereas also he that is born in his kingdom becometh poor. I considered all the living which walk under the sun, with a second child that shall stand up in his stead. There is no end of all the people, even of all that have been before them. They also that come after shall not rejoice in him. Surely this also is vanity and vexation of spirit." The final key here to laboring or working with wisdom is that we must seek influence over power. We must seek influence over power. So in these last few verses here, we have a parable written by Solomon. And it's somewhat confusing. There's differing interpretations of meaning here, but it seems that what's going on is Solomon is talking about a succession of kings. We have 2 kings here. One was a seasoned king of great tenure, yet was foolish and would not receive the counsel of others. And then Solomon speaks of a second, it appears to be a second king here, his successor, a young man who came to power from poor roots. He rose up from the bottom to the top. Yet it talks about the end of both of these men, two differing stories here, but the end was the same. Despite their efforts, there were people that were not happy with them, that failed to appreciate what they had done during their reign. What Solomon is doing here is he is drawing attention to the foolishness of seeking status and power above all else. Because like the wind, that popularity and power is fickle, and it is easily blown away. It fades away. Solomon is teaching us here that it is better to stay poor and wise than popular and foolish, because it may open the door for you to have an opportunity to influence somebody else that you otherwise would not have the opportunity. How does this apply to us? And again, it goes back to what we value in this life. What are you chasing? Some of us are just chasing titles, advancements. What's the end of that? Really, what is the end of that? You get there, then what? Ultimately, Solomon says, you get there, and then people aren't happy with you. And in the end, you're very likely to fall out of grace with these people. And we see this as very true in the world around us, right? Popularity doesn't last. One moment you were at the top, and the next, one mistake later, you were at the bottom again. Don't we see this time and time again with our nation's leaders? Depending on the day, depending on the month, they are in power, people love them, and then the next month a decision's made, something happens in the world that may even be out of their control completely, and where are they? They're on somebody's hit list. Sports figures. I come from Chicago, and the Chicago Bears quarterback, Jay Cutler, that boy, he struggles from time to time. One day people love him. He's given the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. Next day, if it's a loss, they're ready to kill him. Seeking a status, when you get there, isn't all it's cracked up to be, is what Solomon's saying. And the question again must be asked, where is the priority in what you are doing in your life right now? The answer, and you're seeing a pattern here, right, in these points. Who is involved here? What ought to be prioritized above all else? Well, certainly God, giving glory to God, living your life for God. But what does that look like? Being the hands and feet of God in this world as people. People are what matter in life. Your jobs will fade away. Your careers will be a forgotten thing. We work so hard to be deemed successful in this life by the world around us. And unfortunately, I think this creeps into the church far too often. What is important? What do you value? Are you currently influencing someone for Christ right now? Can you think of somebody, anybody that you are influencing for Christ right now? Maybe you're mentoring somebody. Maybe there's somebody at work that you are burdened about, that you pray for, that you engage in the gospel with from time to time. Who are you actively investing your life in right now? There's a lot of ways that we can apply this passage today, right? A lot of things we can take away on living this life within the context of work, laboring in wisdom. As I was preparing the message, I was trying to consider a good example to close on, and I immediately thought of Christ. And a lot of times that's the cliche answer, right? Christ was perfect. Of course you're going to use him. But no, I considered it, and he really is the epitome of what Solomon is talking about here, of a life that was invested not in a career, not in some power, but in people. Christ truly lived a life content with the lot God had given him. Christ was not a powerful, successful, wealthy king by the world's standards at all. In fact, he was the exact opposite, yet he was content to what? He was content to live that lowly life. That was not a problem for him. He held little value for material wealth. Yet as represented in his entire mission of coming down to this earth to die for us as sinners, he found true value in people, in relationships. Christ's life was all about relationships, was it not? That's what he did. The money, the career, the power, it didn't matter. Could he have come, and rightfully so, as that? If anybody could, he could, right? But he didn't. He was about people. He was about relationships. He was the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords who never once sought power and fame during his time on earth. Yet in humble wisdom, he influenced. influencing ultimately the world through his actions, ultimately on the cross, so that you and I could have a relationship with him. One of the phrases that I often consider when I find myself distracted by the success model of this world is one, I don't even remember where I heard it. I know I've shared it with a couple of you already, but it's one that I remind myself of over and over and over again. I have to keep my heart and my mind on track, and it is this. There are two things and two things only in this earth, or on this earth, that are eternal. Number one, the Bible. Number two, people. And the life dedicated to these two things is a life well lived. Where is your focus right now? What are you being driven by? Is it by jealousy? Are you constantly worried about your standing in the culture and your job? Are you constantly looking to somebody else saying, I wish I had that, or I feel insecure because I don't have what that is or what I want? Don't worry about it. That is not what matters. What matters is people investing. I'm reminded of Matthew chapter 6, verses 33 and 34. It says, but seek ye first what? The kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take therefore no thought for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Don't be distracted by the pursuits of this world. Is your life of labor defined not by the world's standards, but by true biblical wisdom? Would you bow your heads?